Hello, everyone! We have a special announcement today. Autumn Stevens has written a full novel-length adaptation of the Firebreathing Kittens podcast adventure, Spring Break, that is called Kiss of the Seaweed Hag. This is great news! Now you can find a comfy spot and experience this under-the-sea adventure as written word. Here is the back of the book, and then a brief excerpt. I'll read you Chapter 1. The back of the book. Crud Jr. and the Corinthian stroll down to the beach for some sandcastles, sun, and seaweed hags? Join our heroes in a mystery under the sea. The link is amazon.com/dp/B09CRY916X, or you can search Amazon or Google for Kiss of the Seaweed Hag by Autumn Stevens and Firebreathing Kittens, that part's all one word, podcast. Here is a brief excerpt. Kiss of the Seaweed Hag, Chapter 1. One dark, starry night in early May, Chef Luco Suligua shuffled to and fro around the waterfront restaurant and cafe. Every movement he made echoed through the dining hall like the whispers of a ghost. He was alone. Moving quickly but less than gracefully, he picked up broom and dustpan, sweeping the floors with soft, shushing sounds. Outside, the moon shone, its light catching in the ocean waves, lining their crests like cake frosting. Softly murmuring, wave after wave broke against the shore, then retreated to continue their dance. The beach lay long and bare. In the daytime, it had been a hive of activity. Now, only the winds and the waves broke the silence that lay like a heavy blanket on the land. Luco was a simple man. Innocent, even. Blue-skinned and heavy-paunched, the cook was easy to please, easy to satisfy, and always easygoing. He had his job as a cook, a few modest possessions to his name, and a room on Main Street that he called home. He had little to complain of and much to be thankful for. His boss had entrusted him to close up the restaurant for the night, which was no small privilege. And Luco took up the task with enthusiasm, the energy bubbling up from within him like an ever-brightening flame inside a magic lantern. There was something satisfying about putting everything to rights after a long day. Outside, the stars were tiny pinpricks in the sky, their light wan. The big round moon, which hung like a wheel of brie in the inky sky, outshone them easily. Sloping downhill between the restaurant and the beach lay a wide stretch of lawn, its grasses a deep forest green in the growing darkness. Having emptied the dustpan into the trash, Luco washed his wide hands, then picked up a bar mop. He moistened the mop in the sink and set to wiping down the counters, tables, and chairs. The portly man sang a sea shanty softly under his breath and wiped the sweat from his forehead. His head was down, his deep blue eyes intent on the work before him. Beyond the restaurant, beyond the lawn, beyond the beach, lay the ocean, massive, deep, and roiling with secrets. Far down the shoreline, its waves broke in dramatic arcs against craggy boulders, spraying the air with fresh, salty water. Crickets chirped their melodies nearby, and the wind whistled in a desolate cry. Suddenly, a figure arose from the waters, its features cloaked in shadow. Like Hades rising from the underworld, the figure swiped absently at the water and shook its mighty head. From head to foot, it was covered in brown and green plant matter, the seaweed ribbons cascading in curly strands. It lumbered along like a shaggy bear, its legs like twin tree trunks pushing their way through the resisting waters. The figure was silent, moving with barely a sound, its strides drowned out by the crashing of the shore. A long, thick piece of driftwood behind it bobbed on a wave before being dashed into splinters against a boulder with a mighty crack. When the figure reached the sands of the beach, it straightened with some difficulty to its full height, then shuddered horribly. It turned on its spot and looked from side to side, seeking, searching, aiming the crosshairs of its gaze. Its terrible eyes, like two black coals under matted green fur, fastened on the waterfront restaurant up ahead. And it was there that the sargassum-drenched figure directed its footsteps, tramping clumsily along, dripping water with every step, leaving rivulets and pieces of seaweed in its wake. Behind his chef's counter, at the back of the restaurant, Luco had finished wiping down the surfaces, and next he reached for a soft fiber cloth. With short circular strokes of his hand, he set to buffing the counter to a fine sheen. Only the best would do for his boss. Sweating, he was so focused on his work that he didn't look up to the floor-to-ceiling windows across the dining area. Across from him. The view down the grassy hill to the ocean. Because, like a gruesome fishing bobber, the dark figure headed straight toward the waterfront, barely visible from this distance in the night, but coming closer, and closer, and closer, moment by moment. It had ambled the length of the beach, and was soon crossing it, creeping along slowly, taking its time, but never veering from its goal. Drip, 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 went its gangly body as it dripped water. Slip, 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 went its footfalls, sliding on the sand. It let out a moan, and the lowing sound rose in the air like a plume of smoke, rising and melting into the sky, unseen and unheard, passing like a lonely ship in the night. Luco was still busy at his work, buffing away at the counter as if it were an ivory genie's lamp. His hand stilled, and he swept the soft cloth aside. He cocked his head. From certain angles, he could almost see his reflection in the shiny countertop. His boss would be pleased when he opened up tomorrow and saw Luco's fine handiwork. Or so Luco told himself. The man was hardly ever an emotion Luco would describe as pleased. The portly chef leaned his elbows against the counter, relaxed his neck, and dropped his head, taking a breather for a few quiet moments. By then, the seaweed creature had crossed the beach and reached the edge of the lawn. It took one step on the grassy ground, then another. Then it stopped, taking a series of ragged breaths. The light from the restaurant was dim against the jet-black night, and the figure glared, holding a hand to its head. Inside, Luco took a last deep breath, sighed and straightened up. He stretched his arms and lifted his head. He didn't see the monster right away. His gaze moved lazily, tired after a long day of work. The counter, polished like a fine stone. The dining area with its chairs, tables, and white linens. Clean and neat, mostly, just as they should be. The front entrance doors locked from the inside. Or were they? They should be. Luco walked around the counter and made his way to the front. Slowly, his gaze fell on the windows. Something wasn't right. The cook took a few halting steps toward them. He froze on the spot as at last he beheld the Seaweed Hag. It couldn't be. No, that was just a story. And yet, there it was, rising like a tree on the lawn, covered in seaweed and salt and water. Its shoulders were hunched as if it were bracing itself to run straight forward and crash through the windows. It crouched. Luco's face went white as a sheet. His mouth worked for several moments, opening and closing like a fish just plucked out of water, but no sound came out. He panted, sweat rolling down his back while cold frisons flew up his spine. His hands went to his eyes, his cheeks, his neck, but his movements didn't erase the figure of the shadowy sea creature from outside the windows. It was real, very real. With a single intake of breath, Luco loosed a blood-curdling scream. Chapter 2. It was a warm spring morning in early May, the year of our gods 49590. The sun cast a bright sheen over the land, enveloping it in a balmy embrace. A gentle breeze blew through the air, soaring in from a great distance, carrying with it the heady smells of salt, seaweed, and driftwood. Seagulls cawed their haunting cries, and the ocean waves lapped at the shore, murmuring like a siren's lullaby. 2 men sauntered toward the Firebreathing Kittens Guild Hall. They were a warrior monk by the name of the Corinthian, and a teen vampire wizard by the name of Crud Jr. They reached the guild's massive double doors and swung them open. As they strolled inside, they brought the fresh salt air in with them. And that's the end of what I'm going to read you from Kiss of the Seaweed Hag by Autumn Stevens. It's a pretty good book. You should check it out. It's on Amazon. And we really appreciate when the authors adapt these stories into novels. They do a fantastic job. It's fun reading them. So please support us and pick up your copy of Kiss of the Seaweed Hag from Amazon.com. It comes in ebook or paperback, your choice, and tell your friends about us. Thank you.